The mainstream media is still refusing to report on this Awan brothers scandal. This is despite this scandal raising a number of questions. I just touched on this Zero Hedge article in one of my last videos. Runs through a few of the questions that people have been asking about this scandal. These are just some of the questions that have been raised. But why did Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the former campaign head of the DNC, why did she threaten the chief of the U.S. Capitol Police with consequences for holding equipment that was confiscated as part of an ongoing legal investigation? Why did Debbie Wasserman Schultz keep Awan, this now indicted, arrested last month, IT aide? Debbie Wasserman Schultz kept Awan on her taxpayer-funded payroll all the way up until the day of his arrest by the FBI at Dulles Airport while trying to flee the country to Pakistan. This is amidst months of investigation. Awan was reportedly barred from even accessing the computers that he was hired to work on. He would have been unable to do his job, even Debbie Wasserman Schultz still paying him during this period. What, if anything, also does the Awan family know about the DNC hacks? It's a very big question. What could they know about the DNC hacks that may have caused Debbie Wasserman Schultz to act this way? There have been claims of espionage, blackmail, a number of issues that this investigation, if there is a full and thorough investigation, could expose a lot of corruption that traces back to many congresspeople that the Awan brothers have worked for, and of course the criminal activity by Awan himself. The way that things are going since the indictment, it seems like Democrats are doing their best to block a full investigation. This is, I think, for many further evidence that they are protecting the Awans because of some blackmail that he may have on these congresspeople. A former lawyer, former U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, recently pointed out that the indictment appears to go out of its way not to mention that Imran was apprehended while in the process of fleeing the country. This is something that you would imagine would be one of the things that were first brought up in the first set of indictments. This is the most recent report, further more proof that the Democrats are doing their best to block a full investigation. It's being reported that the FBI investigation of espionage, blackmail, and other charges in the Awan case that this could expand to, it's being blocked by an Obama Department of Justice appointee who worked for Holder and Lynch. Now, this was already being talked about somewhat over the past few weeks since the Awan indictment, but this article goes into a little bit more detail about exactly the exact details of this cover-up. This is the True Pundit article. It reads, federal agents believe the Justice Department is meddling in the FBI's efforts to expand the Imran Awan and Hina LV investigation in what appears to be a blatant attempt to shield Democratic members of Congress entangled in the burgeoning criminal case. That's because the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Channing Phillips, who is running point on the case, is likewise a Democrat. He was appointed by President Barack Obama. Phillips was appointed just months before the grand jury convened to weigh evidence in the Awan case. FBI agents feel they have amassed crucial evidence to expand the Awan case into a wider investigation of possible espionage and blackmail, but the Bureau is getting pushback from the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. This is according to anonymous federal sources. So take this, you may want to take this with something of a grain of salt, but it does play into it. It further confirms what many of us are speculating as far as this investigation being blocked. And it would make sense, especially considering that the Trump nominated U.S. attorney that was supposed to replace Phillips, who is the Obama holdover, they seem to be delaying this change. Senator Chuck Schumer, this article points out, and Senate Democrats have stalled Lao's confirmation, the Trump appointee. This has provided Schumer de facto control. This is what this article is claiming of the Awan investigation, which otherwise could implicate dozens of his fellow congressional Democrats, including Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the former chairwoman of the DNC. Wasserman hired the Awans as IT specialists and shared the 4 Awans with other Democrats for classified computer work. And again, she some of these other congresspeople dropped the Awans during this investigation. Debbie Wasserman Schultz was the last holdout. She only fired Imran after his arrest. This was just about a month ago. In essence, this article goes on to explain Schumer can currently dictate, Chuck Schumer has a great amount of power over whether any charges are brought against members of Congress linked to Awan-related crimes, according to their sources. Until either Lau is confirmed or Phillips is forced out by President Trump, Awan and LV, husband and wife, were indicted on bank fraud and financial crimes on August 17th. But federal agents believed this case is much larger than the mortgage-related crimes. There's growing evidence, for instance, the Awans could have sold classified information to foreign governments outside the United States. Then there's also growing talk that the Awans may have blackmailed Congress with damaging emails and photos. This would in part explain why Congress, these congressional Democrats specifically, are working so hard to protect the Awans. Debbie Wasserman Schultz is really committing, she's really hampering her own political career. I think, has completely destroyed her own political future in order to suppress this investigation. She was already, of course, disgraced for her involvement in the DNC fraud lawsuit. She's still technically in office, but she has been there's been a lot of damaging coverage on Debbie Wasserman Schultz in the way that she's dealt with this Awan brothers scandal. She's looked very suspicious in the way that she's dealt with it. FBI sources from this article also believe someone in Congress tipped the Awans off months before their grand jury indictment. On Sunday, former Congressman Jason Chaffetz, who retired just weeks ago, predicted the Awan and LV bank fraud indictment could explode and expand into something much larger. He said the case could prove the proverbial tip of the iceberg involving accomplices, according to the former chairman of the Oversight Committee for the House. This news outlet, True Pundit, reported 6 days before the Chaffetz revelations that the Awan case was much larger than believed. It's what many of us that have been following it, the scandal, basically everyone does believe that this goes much deeper than what is being reported. And the family was tipped off. The family was also tipped off prior to the indictment by Congress. It's what's also believed by this source. Phillips, whose name is a legacy in the Democratic circles, could not be reached for comment. His father was once nominated on the Democratic presidential ticket. So just a brief overview of Phillips. He was hired by Holder. Phillips began his career in the U.S. Attorney Office for the District of Columbia in 1994. By 2010, Phillips was Holder's senior advisor at Justice. He stayed in the role serving Lynch after Obama appointed her to replace Holder. Holder praised Phillips in a previous statement, calling him one of the smartest, most dedicated prosecutors I've worked with during my almost 4 decades of public service. Finally, Awan and his wife, as well as his 2 brothers, are also targets of an investigation into an alleged procurement scam where the group is suspected of stealing equipment, BlackBerry phones, and hacking house IT systems without permission. And this is, again, something that's been investigated for months. Reportedly, he was barred access to even accessing, to even working on these computers. Meanwhile, Debbie Wasserman Schultz still paying him up until his arrest just a few weeks ago. Now, the True Pundit article seems to be framing this as something of a war between the FBI and the Department of Justice and some of these Democrats, Schumer. There is evidence, though, that the deep state is also protecting the Awans. Specifically, this other article, I pointed this out in the previous video, but I think it's notable to point out that Hina Alvi, he's Imran Awan's wife. She is Imran Awan's wife. She fled the country back in March. She was detained by U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents with over $12,000 cash in her luggage. This is technically a crime by itself if it's not properly disclosed, but was allowed by the FBI to leave the country despite having been under investigation for months. We must also ask again, why did the FBI allow LV to flee before she boarded her March 5th flight to Qatar en route to Pakistan? Agents briefly detained her at U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents. They had already searched her baggage and found over $12,000 in cash. As has been pointed out, it's a felony to move over $10,000 in U.S. currency out of the country. This itself would have been a felony. There was no indication that she completed a required government report. So in the complaint affidavit submitted to the court when Awan was arrested last month, this was not brought up either. By the time LV fled, the Awans had been under investigation already by various federal agencies for at least 3 months at that time of the arrest. This was months ago. The FBI was sufficiently attuned to Awan's criminality that its agents went to the trouble of chasing LV to the airport, so they knew something was happening. If she didn't fill out the required form, she should have been arrested for the currency violation. Is it possible that, this is speculation on the part of this original article, but they ask, is it possible that rather than arresting her, federal agents from the FBI instructed her instead to complete the form on spot? One would hope not, but even in such an unlikely event, LV would undoubtedly have made false statements about the provenance of the cash. That would have also been a felony, providing more grounds for arrest. Why let her go, especially when, as its agents told the court in an aforementioned affidavit, the FBI does not believe that LV has any intention to return to the United States. So it's clear that the Awan brothers are being protected. How many of these different organizations are working together, colluding together to block a full investigation? We'll have to see how this plays out, if there are further indictments that are brought up. We will, obviously, this is still an ongoing investigation, so I will follow up with information as it comes out. But as things stand, it does seem like it's being blocked by these Democrat holdovers, and the FBI could have done a lot more to set up this case. There's a lot of damaging information that seems to be completely ignored in this indictment as it stands. Let me know what you think about what's happening in the comments. If you could leave a like on this video, that's greatly appreciated, and subscribe to the channel. Finally, I just point people over to my Patreon account. I'm over at patreon.com/realityreader. Thank you, everyone that's donated. It makes a huge difference. Even $1 or $2 makes a huge difference. Allows me to keep reporting on these issues. Again, leave a comment, leave a like. If you could subscribe to the channel, it's great. Thanks, everyone.